I'm not sick or struck dumb, or don't you know a kick when you see one can't quit. We're not done, we're gonna kick till the next one.
Hello, fine people, and welcome to The Kick. It is the final episode of 2024. I am Chance, your host. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being along for this first year of this podcast. We're talking about Furiosa on today's episode. It's the last selection in the 2024 Passion Project series. And a fitting one, too, because I think when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, this is my favorite movie of the year. So, if you're here for the main event, you're here to hear me break that one down with Ian Barry. That conversation is coming up. Ian, super cool friend and person who I've met in the past year. He's both easy and difficult to introduce because if he's okay with me saying this, he's probably not. He can be cagey about having some of the things he does publicized, but I will say all around film fanatic. He's an artist. He's a longtime projectionist. He hosts a super cool film trivia night here in Astoria called Films with Benefits. He's a film programmer. He has an incredible knack for getting people excited about movies, which in my little circle of the world is just such a great pro-enthusiasm skill. So, psyched to know him, psyched to have him. I also thought it could be fitting and fun here at the beginning of the episode to drop my top 10 list in, since it is really that time of year. I'm about to submit my ballot for the Portland Critics Association. And so let's go in descending order from 10 to 1, shall we? Number 10, my best movies of 2024, Rebel Ridge, Jeremy Saulnier, Aaron Pierre taking apart guns and taking apart dirty cops. You heard Noah Ballard and I talk about that one. Number 9, my favorite documentary of the year, Confessions of a Good Samaritan. Super interesting self-reflective doc by Penny Lane, who's made cool docs like Hail Satan and Kenny G for the Music Box series on HBO. Confessions of a Good Samaritan is about, in some ways, it's about her journey to altruistically donate a kidney to a stranger, but it's also more exploratory of just like what that means in general. Why some people want to do things for strangers and some people are kind of rightfully perplexed by that. It goes from brain scans to surgical history. Super interesting doc. Number 8, The Brutalist. This is Brady Corbet's 4-hour epic about a fictional architect in post-war Pennsylvania. Adrian Brody unquestionably gives one of the performances of the year. And if you like thinking about, does the shape of that building have anything to do with a person? You're going to like The Brutalist. The theater is the way to see it, folks. There's a genuine intermission, as though you were seeing Lawrence of Arabia in 1966. Red Rooms, French-Canadian movie I'm super glad I just caught this week. I guess you'll hear Ian and I talk about it briefly on the end of the episode. But just a great look into one of my favorite subjects, which is like the dark heart of true crime. I saw The TV Glow, the second film from Jane Schoenbrunn. I think this was the movie this year where I felt like the director had the most control, like they had created a character's internal universe from scene to scene and invited the audience to walk into it and push on the walls and see what's it like in the space where this person's consciousness lives. Loved it. Number 5, My Old Ass. You heard me talk to Ray Gill Jr. about that one on this feed. Cried my eyes out. And a movie that really like snuck up on me That's on Prime right now. It's about a teenage girl who has a heroic mushroom trip right before she goes off to college and meets her older self, and they convene through time, and the older Elliot gives the younger Elliot advice, including one thing that she says, don't do this. And Elliot has to explore what it means to do or not do that. My number 4, Nosferatu. This is Robert Eggers remaking the century-old German expressionist vampire folktale. Lots of conversation, including in my own head, about like what he sort of adds to that story, and I think there are interesting wrinkles about the kind of blatantly assaultive, dominating nature of like what vampires do to people in stories, and also just I think my favorite sounding movie of the year, when Bill Skarsgård speaks. That's the sound of 2024 movies that I hear rumbling deep in the back of my head. Nickel Boys, Ramel Ross's adaptation of the Colson Whitehead novel, by far the most interestingly shot and edited movie of the year, because it's all first person. You're in the character's first person POV, but it switches from character to character. The way Ramel Ross incorporates both like archival footage and time jumps leaves you at times not knowing where you are in this friendship between these two teenage boys at the quote-unquote correctional facility in the 60s in deep, swampy, racist Florida. But as it moves and unfolds, it's another movie that sneaks up on you because you're just not sure what you're seeing until the movie kind of goes into full collage and montage mode as it nears its end. And boy, I just sat in the dark and ruminated and emoted for about 15 minutes after that one, which is not something a lot of movies can do to you. Number 2, Challengers. Did a whole kick leading up to Challengers. It is probably the most fun I had in a movie theater this year, and the most fun I had talking people's ears off about it afterward. And number 1, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. It is George Miller's prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which would have easily been my favorite movie of 2015. It's a different kind of movie, as Ian and I are going to talk about. It takes the instant iconography of that Charlize Theron performance from Fury Road and begs the question, what kind of world shapes such a driven, tough, statuesque person? And Furiosa seeks to answer in a very winding, unconventional, but still with some of the very best action set pieces of the year. Super psyched to get into it. Let's do that right now. Thank you guys so much for listening to The Kick in its inaugural year. This is the 28th episode, which feels both like a lot and not very much. I suppose that's kind of emblematic of what I want this show to be. With this show, my number one thing that I've learned is that I just want to let it be what it is and make sure at all times it is fun and interesting, at the very least to me, hopefully to the guests, hopefully to the audience. And 28 episodes I suppose feels like the right amount, you know? Some binges and some breaks. I really want to thank Jim Laskowski at the Now Playing Network for having the show. That put some wind beneath its wings immediately. Really appreciate his generosity and really appreciate all the guests who came on in year one, whether they were the 4 and 5 timers like Ben Campbell Ferguson and Noah Ballard, or a writer who was kind enough to answer a cold call. I have truly enjoyed speaking with everyone and filling my 8.5 by 11 computer paper with indecipherable notes as I watch movies and coming up with goofy games, and I can't wait to do it more next year. So I am realizing as I edit the conversation between me and Ian that nobody stops to synopsize Furiosa because between us we've seen it like combined 12 times. So it's directed by George Miller, the Australian legend who has done all 5 Mad Max movies, and it starts when Furiosa is a girl. She is kidnapped from her home in the Green Place, this kind of oasis-like livable spot in the middle of the nuclear wasteland. And this biker gang takes her off. Her mom chases them down. It's just exhilarating right from the jump. The biker minions give Furiosa to their lord, Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth in one of my favorite performances of the year. Light spoilers, Furiosa's mom, super valiant, does not make it. Furiosa basically falls in with Dementis and his horde as they accrue power in the wasteland, and they get to loggerheads with Immortan Joe, who's the sort of like autocratic leader that you meet in Fury Road. Furiosa ends up working for Immortan Joe in an era of her life, and you see how she trains to drive and command a war rig with the help of another driver named Praetorian Jack, played by Robert Burke, and also contemplates the meaning of revenge against Dementis. And it is a revenge movie through and through that is thinking deeply about what that means. All right, let's get into it. Return to the Outback. Furiosa.
Whatever you have to do. However long it takes. Promise me you'll find your way home. Furiosa. Give me this promise.
Here to talk about the best Peach movie since Call Me By Your Name. It's Ian Barry. Thanks for coming over, man.
Thank you, Chance. Pleasure to be here.
Let's just start with, why is Furiosa your 2024 passion project?
Yeah. I love the film, but I think it was your idea to... I think it was your idea.
You know, every
guest
I've had in this series probably could have said that, or it's just like, oh, why did I pick this? Because you fucking asked me.
You actually picked it.
Is this... Okay, well, let me try to define the parameters a little more. Is this your
We're off to a great
Is
start.
this your favorite movie of 2024?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite film, but it's definitely the film I've watched and thought about the most. I will say that much.
Can I ask what your favorite is?
That's a good question. There were several that I really liked this year. I liked Astoria. I liked Godzilla -1. I liked Love Lies Bleeding.
Yeah.
I liked all those movies.
Okay, nice.
But I think probably I would have to say my favorite movie was Red Rooms, which I think you saw recently.
I just watched it last night.
Fucking loved it.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that.
Fucking crazy.
Maybe at the end we'll talk about films. But I would say still maybe Furiosa could
Furiosa
qualify
would
as a
definitely
passion
qualify.
project because
Yes.
you watched it. How many times have you seen it now? 6?
I've lost count. No, it's more like maybe 9 times now.
Good Lord.
I know, yeah.
So what keeps
Yeah.
you coming back?
Well, I don't normally get excited for movies to come out. I'll usually be like, I'll get around to it whenever I have the opportunity. I'll go see it. But this one was actually one that I counted down the days to opening because I loved Fury Road so much that I was jacked to see this on opening day. I saw the last showing on opening night. And there were like 4 people in the audience. I was like, what the fuck is going on here?
Man.
It was really disappointing. And I remember as soon as it ended, I was disappointed in myself that I had chosen the last showing of the day because I would have watched it again immediately. I would have gone out and bought another ticket and watched it again immediately. That's how much I actually loved it, more than I expected. I try to keep my expectations pretty low.
Sure.
When I go into any movie. But this one, it was hard to keep those expectations low because Fury Road was so great. And the character of Furiosa is such a fucking epic character.
Yeah.
But then the movie was fucking phenomenal. Blew me away. And I think I went like 2 days later. Then I went like 2 days after that. So I think I saw it, 3 times in the first week when it was open. Anyway.
Were
that's a long
you
story.
trying to, the going back so many times, was it things in the story that you wanted to try and understand on a deep level? Was it more like that kind of, I just want to feel the absolute high of that war rig chase again? What kept you revisiting?
There are highs in that movie. And I'll tell you, the war rig chase isn't my favorite high in the movie. It's actually what's that?
That's one of my questions. What is? Is it the bullet farm?
Yeah, it's the
ambush?
bullet farm. Because what is so overwhelming about the bullet farm siege is that they're fighting for each other.
Yeah.
Praetorian Jack and Furiosa are fighting for each other, and it's almost done entirely wordless. You just see it happen, and it just lets you. It trusts that you're going to be smart enough to get everything that's going on and what's at stake and what they're trying to do, and that's really smart, elegant filmmaking. I feel right there.
Totally.
But that's my favorite part. But yeah, it wasn't just that to get those highs again. It was what was it? I feel like the movie is really fucking relevant.
Okay.
We live in some really fucking uncertain times. It feels like we're perpetually these days right on the fucking edge, and we're just as a civilization, we're just dangling by that dandelion on the cliff, and we're just, and any sort of fucking wind, any breeze that comes by, we're into fucking chaos and annihilation. And that's, it could be, climate change, it could be disease, it could be war, any of these fucking things that seem really, really plausible at this point. And so this movie, it's about a character, a person who is she is trying to endure and overcome a culture of cruelty, a society of cruelty. But more than that, and it's also about storytelling as a means, storytelling itself as a means to overcome a culture of cruelty. That's what kept me going back. That's what kept me going back and rewatching. I was like, oh my God, this is how does one? The history man says it right at the very beginning. If I could look at my goddamn notes, yes, as the world falls around us, how must one brave its cruelties? Yep. That sets up the whole, for me. That's what set up the whole thing. I was like, fucking, that's the age we're living in right now. And how does one do that? Yeah, lessons from the wasteland. That's chapter 2 of the movie. But I also think that could be a very eloquent, adequate subtitle for the film itself. Instead of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, it could be called Furiosa: Lessons from the Wasteland. That's what it could be called.
Yes, and that, would you say that mission statement or that thesis gives Furiosa a level of like depth and exploration that is a different pitch than Fury Road? Leading question.
Yes, 100%.
Because I feel like that was a lot of, I'm going to set up some straw men here, but nothing that I didn't actually hear anyone say or complain when they were like, yeah, Furiosa liked it. But everyone was really comparing it to Fury Road.
Yeah.
Perhaps because
Yeah.
I do wonder why. I know I can speculate why George Miller did it, but just putting Fury Road as the credits, I think might yield some. He's basically asking for the comparison in some ways, which maybe he shouldn't have done. But it's a different kind of movie. Completely
different kind of movie. Yeah. Fury Road is a road movie. It's a flat out action movie that has a very stock, predictable character arc.
Yeah. Everyone you meet, you only meet them through action, basically. Yeah. They're already flying in motion by the time you're like, who's this person?
That's true. Furiosa is a completely different beast. It's really more of a character study, but also it's about mythology. It's about making a myth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the whole movie is about, and why we need myths in the first place. That's not what Fury Road is concerned with at all. And that's fine. I love Fury Road. 5 out of 5 stars. Fucking great movie. But it's a different movie entirely.
Let's dig into it, because I think you hit on, when I watched it for merely my third time last night, one of the things that I enjoy about most of the Mad Max movies in general is they tend to do these like hard resets, right? And everyone you meet, all these new characters you meet with these wild names and insane costuming. George Miller, he doesn't really give a damn about like 2024 Hollywood storytelling in terms of like, so who is this person? Like,
I know.
Why do they do what they do? And he's just like,
all the exposition and all the fucking useless origin stories, all that fucking
even compared to Fury Road, where it's just like, now Rictus Erectus has a brother named Scrotus, and you're like, well, Scrotus wasn't in the other movie, and George is like, I don't care.
Yeah, who cares?
He's here now. Do you like how he looks? You like his Neanderthal head? And that really got me thinking about like the difference between like world building, quote unquote, and myth making. And there like is a difference, because when you're like world building as a screenwriter, like it's a lot of like why and how, and certainly like this movie is kind of premised on a basic level of like who is Furiosa, how did we get here, but it's not the kind of questions that just yield more like why and how questions. It's not like, so what's the system to become a Praetorian, or like there are various ranks and things you must ascend. It's more like, no, I'm going to keep putting archetypes in front of you that are totally specific but also totally legible in a world that's like starved for information and story, as you said. But yeah, go off on that,
the
man.
movie's
like,
more philosophical, I think, than Fury Road or other contemporary films. But I'll do you one better. I'm not even sure Scrotus was a real character. I'm not even sure Scrotus exists at all. Because we don't see him in Fury Road. Fury Road is definitely much more of a objective take on this world. Although I could argue like none of them are objective. But I think there is no narrative or narration. There is no framing device that someone's telling you the story in Fury Road, like there is in Furiosa. The history man is telling you this story, and I think he's very aware of the power that myths have versus fact. And so there are tons of shit that happen in Furiosa that can't possibly happen in real life. So you're going to tell me that she's hanging by her arm, and then, several hours later, Dementus is going to come by, and he's the one who suddenly finds that she's gone? Like, she's managed to rip her arm off, somehow get the chain around the axle of the truck, hop on a motorbike and escape, and no one's going to fucking notice? And she's not going to die from bleeding to death? No one. That's completely unrealistic, not possible. But that's not the fucking point here. The point is the lesson to be learned, the example to be had from a character who does this. The stories, the lessons to be told, the fruit. We'll get to the fruit later. That's the whole point. That's why the Mystery Man is using it. It's a storytelling device, the power of stories, and why we need examples like this. I'm not sure Scrotus exists at all. I think the History Man might have made Scrotus up.
There are times when at the end of the History Man is like, some people say that she did this to Dementus.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people say he draws attention to the fact that like...
Exactly. There are no real facts, which is kind of funny because he's known for reciting these facts, and he's tattooed with history, and he's called a history man. But I think that's actually a misnomer. I think he's actually more of a philosopher / myth reciter, myth maker. Yeah.
And it's super like exhilarating as the viewer, and just takes me back to like the Campbellian things that are so great about the original Star Wars, where it's just like everyone you see in Star Wars 77 is like, there's just an archetype with like a little bit of window dressing. Like you could watch it as a silent movie, and that's just the funny thing about like all the movies that precede, where it's just like, so what did Anakin have for breakfast that day? It's like, that doesn't matter to me when I'm staring like Darth Vader in the face. And you get it from the very first moments of this movie where her mom is chasing her down and the two guys that have Furiosa are like, what's that sound? That's the Thunder Bike. Yeah. And it's sort of like the Thunder Bike's not anything we've ever heard of, but it
doesn't matter.
It doesn't come up again, but it just instantly imbues her mom with this power, because the other people in the story are like, oh, she's on this bike that must be this special bike that just like magnifies her importance as like and the archetype of the mom who would lift up the tank to save her kid or whatever.
Right. And she escapes by wearing this fucking skull over her face and bursting in the fire that she doesn't apparently feel at all. No. Yeah, it is about these larger than life legends that Miller is making here. It's not. That's what I kind of think about. You know, all of his previous Mad Max movies. I think they are definitely different takes on the same character in the same world. And I like to say that these are kind of like the Gospels. These are Gospels of Mad Max, where, you know, in the Bible, for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're all different kind of takes on the same character. I mean, Jesus fluctuates. His character kind of even contradicts himself throughout the tellings of his story. And this is kind of what Max is. From version to version to version, these are not the same Maxes. And in the fourth one, it's not even the same actor playing Max. It's a completely, doesn't look like him, doesn't sound like him, doesn't act like him.
Right.
You know, it's not the same Max. And so in this movie, it's taken even further. It's like even more of a biblical. I think, you know, the further away we get from the original Mad Max and the further into, I guess, the apocalypse or whatever, the wasteland we get, the more the storytelling regresses and it becomes more primal. And this is, I think, us actually getting into Old Testament sort of stuff. This is where it's going now. Mm-hmm. We're not even in the New Testament anymore. We're going to the Old Testament.
The mad prophets at war.
Right.
And all that.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Yep. And that, I think you kind of see Dementis, the way there's some very religious iconography going on in the way he's depicted in some of these scenes. It kind of looks like, the mad prophet, Moses or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why I think, you know, it's important to remember these things don't have to happen or they don't even have to be plausible in real life. Moses didn't fucking part the Red Sea. Jesus did not.
Says you.
Jesus did not come back after 3 days. These things don't happen.
Other guests on this show have disagreed.
And that's okay. This is a free country, the land of milk and honey. We're free to discuss all of these things. But what my point is that it doesn't matter whether it's possible or not.
Yeah,
that is not relevant here. What's relevant is the ideas that are instilled, the inspiration that is instilled within the listener, the viewer of this story. That's the important thing. That's why Moses is important. That's why parting the Red Seas is important. That's why Jesus coming back. That's why it's important. It doesn't matter if it's real. It's the inspiration that is lodged within the person's mind. That's what's important.
Another of the criticisms of Furiosa that I had kind of been fighting with, a movie that I've loved since the first time I saw it, was just sort of like, for a movie called Furiosa, like, boy, does the lens really find Dementis? Like, a lot. And I'm sort of like, I never had too much of a problem with that, because I was sort of like, well, that's just George Miller going where he's interested. And he's right about what's interesting in the movie. That's a great performance, and I want to talk more about it. But one of the things I kind of realized last night is the whole, the strategic gambits and the different styles of leadership that are like clashing between Immortan Joe and Dementis are all sort of like, it's compelling to me, but I'm also like, oh, this is a distraction. Like, this is me like following a quote unquote, like an argument between Trump and Elon Musk, when really what I should be thinking about is like, what should I be doing with my own life? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the shape of this story as well. Like, you spend a lot of Act 2, 3, 4 with like, who's going to win this battle of the wasteland, and really like, it's all about how will Furiosa create hope in a hopeless place. And so like I feel like that takes on the shape of like the questions that mythology provokes, the questions we should be asking ourselves, is the question that she answers at the end, despite all the kind of fun villain window dressing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure that the villainry, the Dementis part is all window dressing. I don't know. I think that's part of the relevance here for me. I think that is like, it's putting a face to the culture of cruelty. Mm-hmm. That's, because I think it makes that quest for her personal. Whereas
Right.
Fury Road is a very impersonal quest. At least you don't really know the beef between Furiosa and Immortan Joe. And you don't know he's just a good bad guy. She's just trying to get away. You don't really, there's not a lot there. Yeah, he has a bunch of wives. She's trying to escape back to the green place. But there's not a lot of personal beef, at least I feel, when you're watching Fury Road. And besides, it's more about Max's story anyway.
Yeah.
Furiosa just kind of takes over, as he's like a force of nature in that movie. But it's really Max's story about being this, scavenger guy out for himself who learns to fight for a larger cause. But in Furiosa, it's a personal fucking story.
Totally.
Absolutely. Dementis is Trump. He's a very charismatic, very funny, very what's the words I'm looking? Very cruel, sociopathic, manipulative, and he doesn't have his shit together. He's very disorganized.
Great at taking over things, not good at running them.
Not good at running them at all. Yes.
Yeah.
And he can't seem to think more than one step ahead. Which is all very Trumpian. And in contrast, I think Immortan Joe is more like a Kim Jong-un, who's
totally
fucking He's brainwashed all of these people.
Yeah.
And that's why he succeeds. That's exactly why he succeeds.
I think it's super entertaining. It's like the kind of Mansonian cult leader versus like the Stalinist cult leader.
Yeah.
and you see why the Kim Jong-un wins.
Exactly. You can see exactly why he
has
wins.
his shit together.
Yeah. But Dementis is so charming. He is such a funny, charming guy. And you actually want to like him. Even from the very beginning, I think Furiosa wants to like him and believe him. And I think sometimes, like, what would have happened... he says, he comes up to her and says, just tomorrow you'll have a nice rest tonight. We'll wash you in our best drinking water, and tomorrow we'll take you back to your place, and that's it. And he comes on really smooth.
Yeah.
And I think, at least I see, Furiosa wants to believe him in that moment. And I think to myself, in the what if world, what if that had happened? What would have fucking happened to the green place had she actually led him back there? We saw how Gastown went.
Yeah.
It would have been a fucking disaster in a few years. He would have just fucking burned it down, essentially. But that's why he's such a fucking great character. Hitchcock said, the villains are always the most charming, the most likable ones.
Yeah.
That's why he's such a great villain in this, and he's so fucking smart.
Yo.
The whole the end, the climax. He's the one that articulates why vengeance is not going to work. That's why vengeance isn't a thing. That's why we have to go beyond vengeance. Which is the fruit, and we can go on to that later. But
and another great bit of like holding off on the exposition. You can feel the tension in this movie of like how much it wants to, because he's lost everyone he loves, just like everyone in this world. And I think a lot of screenwriters would be like, let's have him do like a little more of a speech about like what his family was like and what
more
he's
exposition.
Lost. Yeah. And by not
off.
doing that, you don't cross the line with humanizing him, but he still has a lot of value as like an archetype.
Yeah.
That's a funny thing in general of like, I watched Tom Burke, who plays Praetorian Jack, and the interviewer was like, so tell me about, for people who haven't seen the movie, Praetorian Jack is this sort of like just cool as a cucumber, kind of like riff on, his costume is not dissimilar from a Han Solo costume. He looks terrific.
Yeah.
And he's the one who sort of takes Furiosa under his wing as a war rig driver, and then they try to run away together at the end. But just all this stuff where people were like, so who's Praetorian Jack, Tom Burke? And he just like says all this stuff that's not in the movie.
Right.
That clearly
His
George
backstory.
Miller
Yeah.
like had to give his actors.
Right.
And then he was just like, but it doesn't have to be in the film.
It's not important for the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's good directing and good storytelling is when everyone who's making the film are on the same page. They know what they're doing, and they trust that an audience is. You can drop them in at any point, and as long as the actors and the director know what's going on, the audience will catch up. And that information, that backstory is not important. What is important is the stakes and what they want, what they're trying to do to overcome the obstacles.
Yeah.
That's all that's really important. And he knows that. So many fucking screenwriters and directors think they belabor their stories by giving them all this fucking needless, useless bullshit. They think it's motivation. And the audience doesn't need a motivation. The characters need a motivation. The audience does not need a motivation. You just put them into this situation, they'll figure it out what's important and what's not important if they're smart. And I like to think that I'd like to think that most of us are still kind of capable of making those decisions, but I don't know. The movies are really trying to dumb us down. I really do believe that. Yeah.
Did you know that Hemsworth had this performance in him? Were you surprised when you saw it for the first time?
I want to go back for 1 second and talk more about Praetorian Jack and Trump for one quick second. I want to hear that question again. But I love how, because I feel like I'm going to lose this thread. Praetorian Jack's introduction to the film, I think, is so hilarious. And you can edit all this out, and you just might. That's fine. But he doesn't say a word. He comes on, and they're still building the war rig, and someone says, "Who's that?" And the person answers, "That's Praetorian Jack." And the other person says, "He looks lucky." That's his introduction to the whole movie. He looks lucky, and he is really. I mean, what's that saying about luck? It's where preparation meets opportunity, and that's exactly what Praetorian Jack is. But I also feel it's actually more of an apt description for Dementis, because I feel like Dementis gets all of the good breaks where Furiosa gets none of them. And that's also what makes him a great villain, is that things just tend to break his way. And nothing breaks Furiosa. In fact, it goes the opposite. She doesn't get any good breaks in this fucking movie at all. And she has to claw her way. That's what makes her a great hero. A fantastic hero.
Very true.
But anyway, your question again. Hemsworth. Did I know he had it in him? I've never really been a big fan. I don't watch Marvel movies. I think we've probably talked about this. I've seen maybe 2. And what else did I see him in? I saw him in the Cabin in the Woods, which was great. I loved it, but that was early Hemsworth. This, 14 years ago, whenever that fucking movie came out. I don't know. So I don't know if I knew he had it in him.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this came completely out of left field, and then I was looking like, actually, he has kind of played, like, squirrely, charming bad guy before. Bad Times at the El Royale, and then Escape from Spiderhead. But, like, he really puts together, like, you're used to seeing him in the Thor role. He's super charming.
Yeah, very charming.
Comedic and charismatic.
Yeah.
And then they just like put the nose on him and like turn the dial and here
give him
he
a
is.
great vocabulary.
Yeah.
Give him great fucking shit to say. Insights galore, just fucking dropping everywhere.
Do you have a favorite Dementis line? Anything you use in your
A great Dementis line. I think I don't know if I have a favorite one, but the biggest insight, even I think bigger than the confrontation with Furiosa, is I guess the confrontation at the end of the movie. The initial confrontation where Praetorian Jack and her are trying to escape, and he catches them and he hangs her up, and they're fucking dragging Praetorian Jack to his death, and he's just sitting on the truck, and he's the thrill is gone. The high is gone.
Yeah.
He's no longer being sated by this adrenaline shot of horror.
Yeah.
And he says, "I'm bored." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's fucking it."
The one that I like to use in my daily life is when he's saying goodbye to his doomed crew at the end, and it's a man who's given nothing but loquacious
I know.
speeches the whole time, and he just goes, "We've done some mighty things together. Goodbye," and rides off. And so interesting to watch that character also, like his reintroduction once young Furiosa turns into Anya Taylor-Joy and they go see Gastown, and he's kind of like out on the megaphone giving the speech.
Everyone's blaming me.
Everyone's blaming me. And he kind of like wearily like sits down into the frame, like out the driver's side door, and he's got the gray beard now, and he's just like, oh, Jesus.
How did we get here?
This
is not my beautiful life.
No.
This is not my beautiful house.
I used to be, so many more people used to come to my rallies. But I love even now I'm really taken with the, like, you're not expecting to see a charismatic villain like that just get overwhelmed. Like, and he plays it really well, and I part of me wonders, I think it connects nicely to like what I've heard Hemsworth say about the character is like well into production being like, I don't know how the fuck I'm gonna do this. And it was just like all this footage of him just like standing next to George Miller, and he's like, maybe a little bit of this, maybe like they're really finding it like on the set. And then there's the great story about he's like, I was just at my wit's end of like, how the fuck am I going to play this guy? And I'm like at the park with my kids, and I just like start to see these seagulls just like, you know, peacocking and like eating bread and stuff. And I'm like, maybe I should like give him kind of like pitch my voice up and be a seagull. We got the nose, and that was kind of like how he found it. But I think you can feel him also, Hemsworth, straining in an entertaining way, like against the limits, I think, of like even what he can do here.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes,
what do you think are the
Hemsworth.
virtues
Go ahead.
of the Anya Taylor-Joy performance? Because she has approximately 5% the dialogue.
Oh, I know. Hardly any dialogue. Yeah, she hardly talks in the movie. And when she does, she doesn't have the accent that her younger self did, which is kind of weird.
Right.
She lost, like, she didn't talk for 15 years or something, and all of a sudden she doesn't have an accent. But whatever.
Who knows
that's
how that
not
works?
important. That's not important. Sorry, what was the question?
Are there things you like about that performance? Because it's another one where I'm sort of like, well, God, it's not Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's a pity that it wasn't Charlize. Yeah. It really, I wish there was some way to make it with Charlize. Yeah. And it just isn't. That's the role Charlize is going to be known for. When she dies, the headline is going to say Charlize Theron, Oscar winner, star of Mad Max Fury Road, tragically dead in a, toaster oven, incident or something. It's going to be something like that, but that's going to be in the headline.
sometimes when I throw on Fury Road, I actually forget that Max is in it.
Yeah.
Because she takes the movie
her
from
movie.
him
Absolutely.
in a similar way that just in terms of real estate, like Dementis kind of takes the acting real estate away from Furiosa in this movie.
Yeah. It's true. I wish it could have been Charlize, but Anya does I'm not complaining at all. I think she does a terrific, adequate job.
She's great in the assault on the war rig, where she kind of goes from being under the truck to in the co-pilot seat.
Yeah.
Like when she throws the skull back on the steam gasket
right.
just like gives him a look.
Yeah.
When she has to give a fucking look, she
gives
comes
a
to
good
get
look.
it because
She
it's
gives
one
a
of the
good
few
look.
opportunities she has.
Well, she gives quite a few looks, I feel like, in the movie of that particular look.
Yeah.
Like, fuck yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
That look. She does that a number of times in that war rig sequence. And
I have arrived.
yeah, I'm here, bitches.
Yeah.
No, she does a terrific job. But it is a pity that it just couldn't be Charlize. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the second to last shot of the movie, while Anya is doing Furiosa is doing the voiceover, you actually see Charlize
Coming around the corner.
leading the lady into the ladies into the war rig, and it's Charlize's face, not Anya's face.
Right.
And I don't know if that was like footage that was shot for Fury Road that wasn't used, or was it CGI'd? You know what I mean? But whatever the case, it's a choice
Yeah.
Miller made.
Right.
Yeah.
He continues to say this person is becoming a different person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I, as a height snob, I just missed the height. Charlize is like 6 feet tall, and Anya Taylor-Joy is not. And Furiosa is so imposing in Fury Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything bad about Anya's performance, but there is a certain weight and gravity Charlize has that, Anya doesn't have in Furiosa, and yeah.
Could I ask you more about just your relationship to the Mad Max franchise in general? Because you are someone who, famously to me,
famously to
one person, has created a cut of like the first 3 movies into one movie that I find super interesting. And so I imagine you like have given the first. I know that you've given the first 3 a lot of thought and how they hook into the 4th.
Yeah.
What are your
Fury
insights?
Road was definitely the gateway. I'd seen the others previously, but they didn't do much for me. And Fury Road was just like a fucking revelation. It was like, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. And so it made me revisit those other ones. And so, yeah, I decided, with every re-edit of a movie I do, it usually starts out with, this is a good movie, but there's a lot of crap in here too. Can I just take away the crap and make it a good movie on its own?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I thought there was like enough in the first 3 movies to make one really, really good movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, you cut all the children out of Thunderdome.
That's the first big cut. No doubt. Because I told you this the other night. The first 35 minutes of Thunderdome are just
It's like a perfect movie. It is
incredible.
so good.
It is one of, unfortunately, the great drop-offs in like Hollywood movie history.
Yeah, it doesn't come back. And then I feel like the first Mad Max, it's kind of a mess of a movie. It's a vision of a future and a style of storytelling, but it's also like kind of just throwing a lot of shit on the wall and hoping it sticks, and it doesn't really work, I feel, upon rewatching it and growing older and maturing, and it just fucking doesn't really hold any water. I mean, it like
it's more in like the Death Wish milieu almost than a Mad Max movie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a revenge story proper. Which I'm glad Miller made it to this point of his life where he could actually rethink those whole ideas of vengeance.
Yeah.
Because the first one, it was just a straight ahead kind of vengeance movie. But even like before the wife dies, it's a fucking mess of a movie. It's just all over the place. But yeah, once the toe cutter focuses on Max and killing his wife and his kid all the way to the end of the movie, which is only 20 minutes of the movie or something. That's the best part of the movie. The whole first part is kind of like, there's some good car chase scenes. There's some good music.
Yeah.
And I like the style. I like the adrenaline. It's really an aggressive movie, but narratively and I think, emotionally, it doesn't really do much.
It's a tough revisit, especially if you're just like, let me go do all the Mad Max. The first one's going to be like, okay, a little homeworky, a little like, let me see this guy's first dream before he dreamed bigger. Yeah.
But yeah, it's doing homework. It's not really an enjoyable one. And then the second one, it's great. I mean, that one kind of stands alone on its I didn't have to edit that one. That one was pretty great the way it was. Although that feral kid annoys me every time I see him, and I cut him out of the movie. I hate the feral kid. And I also hate the subplot between the gyro captain and the blonde.
Yeah,
it's just come on, get it out of there. You don't need this. Just stick to the fucking good stuff. Stick to Max. That's why we're watching the movie.
Right.
So yeah, that's how I made that cut. I was like, there's enough here to make one really great, solid movie that would be a prequel to Fury Road, a different prequel to Fury Road. Furiosa is also a prequel, but this would be, I think, a much more appropriate prequel to Fury Road, because in my cut, nothing but bad shit happens to Max. It's just fucking horrible thing after horrible thing after horrible thing.
Yeah.
You really feel bad for the fucking guy. He's
Right.
he's a tragic figure.
Yeah.
He doesn't get out on top anywhere. He's just fucking shit upon all the time, and he's just trying to scrape his way to survival, which leads you into Fury Road. Yeah, that was my motivation between. But I wouldn't consider myself a huge Mad Max fan, other than
Someone who spent a ton of time with them.
several hours spending, analyzing and cutting. No, I would really just say that I'm a Fury Road Furiosa fan. I'm
Nice.
just maybe a Furiosa fan. You know what? I'm just gonna say I'm a Furiosa fan.
right.
That's why I love Fury Road so much.
There you go. Can I ask you to partake in, I guess, the only reoccurring segment on the kick, which is truth or trivia?
Shoot.
Sort of, it's truth or dare. So you get to pick whether you want to answer a question truthfully or you want to deal with some trivia, as you've made many people deal with yourself.
And yes, and now that turnabout is fair play. I'm a little scared that I'm not going to be able to deliver. The trivia master is not going to live up to the expectations. So I'm going to take a truth.
Okay.
Do you have these prepared? Do you write these beforehand?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to name you 3 hypothetical artisanal businesses that could open in Astoria tomorrow with Furiosa themed names, and you tell me which one you'd be most likely to patronize, okay?
By the way,
Yeah.
over at Fortune and Glory, I begged Jeremy to name a cider Furiosa on my
Oh.
hands and knees, and
You couldn't get that done?
It didn't go down. I really was trying. Just mean one of the ciders Furiosa, please. Anyway, go ahead.
An apothecary called The Organic Mechanic, a tannery called P-Jacks, or a whiskey bar called Bommy Knocker. Where would you be most likely to find yourself?
The whiskey bar, without
Yeah.
a doubt.
Okay.
Although I'd prefer it as a rum bar.
Okay.
Let's
Nice.
make it a rum bar.
Perfect. Done and done. Can I force you to do a fun piece of trivia? This is more just
Oh yeah,
for the audience.
just okay.
Do you happen to know what monologue Miller made everyone in the Furiosa
Oh, yes,
cast
I do
audition
know
with?
this,
Tell
yes.
the folks.
It's one of my favorites. It's the Mad as Hell speech from Network.
Yep.
Which is, it's so fucking great. It's a great piece of writing, but it also, everyone is going to approach that monologue differently, which is what I think was so wonderful about that speech.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to do it. Yeah.
And yet it really also tells you that he wants to see everyone he casts at the absolute end of their fucking rope. Like,
On the edge.
yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Here you
Yes. Yeah. Great piece of trivia. I did know it, so I didn't.
Great
blow
job.
it. I didn't blow it.
Go. Great work.
We didn't even talk about
What
all
other
this other
Furiosa
shit.
stuff you wanna fire off?
We didn't even talk about all this shit.
What?
The fucking.
What have we not covered?
I got. Well, the fact that the movie pretty explicitly says the way to brave all these cruelties is through storytelling. That I mean, it pretty much says it. And I'd never heard anyone. This came about on my 8th viewing of the movie. It was like, holy shit, that's what the history man is saying at the very beginning. But then he bookends it at the very end. When as you said, he says he's talking about the confrontation between Furiosa and Dementis, and some people say that he did this or she did this. Some people say it went down like this, but I got this from Furiosa's own lips herself. And he finishes his speech by saying it was an echo growing out of a living being.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the perfect description for a legend. That's what a legend is. Mm-hmm. It's an echo growing out of a human being. And then, right from there, Furiosa takes over the narration. She pulls out the peach, and she presents it to the wives. And she says, "This is our first fruit, but it is not for you. Each of us in our own way will vanish from this earth, and then perhaps some uncorrupted life will rise to adorn it." Which I thought for the first 7 viewings, that's some pretty poetic shit. That's cool to end a movie on that, but I don't know what the fuck it means.
Yeah.
But that's what the fruit is. The fruit is The fruit is what comes out of it.
Yes.
The fruit of our labors. What is the result, the reward, the takeaway, the lesson? That is what the fruit is. It's the lesson. And that's what Beyond Vengeance is. It's not vengeance. Vengeance can never balance the scales. As Demenza says, what is beyond vengeance is what you take away from the whole experience, is the lesson from it. That's the story. That is the myth. That is the legend. That's why it has to be larger than that. That's why it has to be epic, as Demenza says. Do you have the chutzpah to make it epic?
Yeah.
That's why it has to be epic. And so that is what the movie means to me. That's how you overcome a culture of cruelty, with stories, with lessons. Not just fucking eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It's something beyond that. And that's kind of what made the movie so impactful for me. That's the lessons of the wasteland.
Yeah, because what I was thinking about, I had complicated feelings about, because the peach pit that she ends up showing them, if you take it kind of literally in the chronology of Fury Road, is, I don't want to say it's a lie, but it doesn't end up making good, because it's not the peach from the green place, and there's no green place left.
There is no green place.
But if you think about it in terms of turning like a villainous archetype into something generative, even beyond who he was or the logic of this story, passing a pit to another group of people who pass a pit to create something entirely new and unimaginable out of this space, it does feel like hope transmogrified somehow.
Yeah, that's what storytelling is. That's the pit that's changes hands from mouth to mouth. That's what the peach is. It's kind of like, that's why it's a sequel, or rather a prequel instead of a sequel. That's why the disillusionment of there not being a green place in Fury Road, that's why this movie had to come second. Is because this is the lesson to be learned. It's not oh, there is no green place. It's what do you take away from this hate, this anger, this frustration that you have with all of this fucking bullshit raining down upon you.
It's even a transcendent change up from the pit's role in the movie up until that point, which was to keep this pit the fuck away from people, because if they see this, then they'll know that the green place exists.
Sure.
So
yeah. And it was also a promise. I think at some point, the promise to her mother that she makes at the beginning of the movie to plant this thing, that mission becomes something else at the end, which is always what's so great about a great movie, is when the motivation changes. It's still maybe the action is still the same, but the motivation to do it is different. It's riper, if you will.
I will.
It's more mature. Yeah. And that's what's so beautiful about that peach. Yeah. The whole time. Anyway, I would like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Turn the tables.
Okay.
The hunter has become the hunted.
Great.
Chance. You wrote in your review. You wrote in your review of Furiosa last night on Letterboxd just 2 short sentences, and I would like you to talk about it. World building is a prison, myth making a great freedom. What did you mean by that?
I think it's a lot of what I have already said, but just that, certainly world building for fiction writers, screenwriters can be a beautiful thing. Some people are amazing at it. Tolkien, George R.R. Martin, people who are just want to create these volumes of made up history that echo through other volumes. Although I would say that a lot of times those strengths are not often the most compatible with 2-hour films. But I feel like a lot of what we call world building in franchise filmmaking 2024 is just so why? Where'd that come from? But why'd they do that? And every time you answer one of those questions, it's just gonna like lead to another question. Who gave Han Solo his blaster? Oh, well, like, was it a really good blaster? Yeah. Like, so who makes all the blasters? And it's just like these
pointless.
Sometimes the question, if I were going to be charitable about it, I would say that the questions that we might be normal for us to have as audiences, especially like when we're kids, which sometimes unfortunately seem to be the questions that adult moviegoers still have about questions, are just not the most interesting ones. And based on, in total agreement with what you've been saying, they're not ones with valuable answers. The ones that are like, so what can you do in your own life? If this person represents this intoxicating yet dangerous archetype, like, what would you do if confronted with such a person? It's like, it's such a better question that comes from dealing in the realm of myth as opposed to like, so how many kids did Dementis had? How did they die? And I literally, I had the image of like, sometimes world building, you're just building a prison around yourself, a prison of questions and answers versus like, if you can, again, I think the beauty of the way that Miller spins these myths is every character you see on screen is like instantly legible. You're just like, hero girl, hideous guy. Like you understand them all immediately. It could be a silent movie. And yet the absolute like lunatic fun that he gets to have with like naming people Scrotus or being like, now he's Red Dementis because they shot off a flare in his face is so, it's like unbridled creativity.
That's the correct answer.
Thanks, Trivia
You
Master.
You passed.
Can we do 2 minutes on Red Rooms? What'd you like about Red Rooms, dude?
Yeah, I fucking loved it. Although I gotta be honest, I haven't seen it in several months, but it was terrifying.
This is
so believable.
A French-Canadian film about a young woman who becomes obsessed with a serial killer.
Yeah,
case
not really yes, a serial killer, but also kind of not. I don't know.
But a great one for like one of my hobby horses is always just,
and that's
like,
not important. It's
when
not important.
People are like, I'm really into true crime.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's sort of like, why?
Absolutely.
What face?
What do you like about this? Yeah.
What part of the abyss are you trying to like put your hands on, and
Yeah.
why does that feel good? It's a great movie for like watching someone kind of lose themselves, but maybe also like self-actualize.
Towards the end there. Yeah, that's one of the things I love as well about the movie is that you don't really get a handle on who she is or why she's doing what she's doing for a long time.
You got to hang in.
Yeah, a long time. But I mean, it's fascinating and compelling the entire time. It's not like you're just left out in the dark and you don't care and what's going on. It's like it's compelling the entire time. Because it just feels like there's so many turns. The more you turn this fucking prism in the light, the more strange and beautiful colors and shadows dance across the wall that you didn't know were even there before. That's a really wonderfully drawn character in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if you're into movies where like the detective gets like too engrossed in a case up until the point where you're like, what is your fucking motivation here? Like, are you sicker than the person doing the thing? This is a great like 2024 version of that with like dark web
even
and
more.
Bitcoin
It's
and just
even further.
a woman whose whole life is like,
because she is a detective, but she's also she's just fucking obsessed.
Right.
I mean, just obsessed. That's what it comes down to. And that scene when she's wearing the thing in the courtroom and fucking sound. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest experiences I've seen watching a movie in a long time.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's our Red Rooms endorsement. Ian, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me, Chance. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
We did some mighty things together. Goodbye.